Hey everyone, welcome to another week of Oh Ship. This week we're going to debate the age-old question, or at least since the early 1900s, is the customer always right? So whether you're in sales or marketing or an entrepreneur or business owner, I'm sure you've heard this expression thrown around at least once. And it's a great question worthy of a healthy debate. This week, I've brought in a really cool guest that I've happened to know for, I guess, approaching 10 years now, called Jim Fassina. Now, when I met Jim, he was the founder of Fosina Marketing Group. I was the CMO of a media company called Scout, and I was actually his client, which is a nice turn of relationship for me frequently, given how often I end up, being on the agency or consulting side. Um, was a really slick direct marketing group. He ran it for over 18 years, had brought over 100 clients to market, and then sold the agency, I think, in 2018. Since then, he's actually founded another agency called Margrod, which has been helping people pivot to this kind of direct consumer world that has become increasingly more important in the last couple of years. All while doing this, he also launched about 10 years ago a direct to consumer coffee brand called Amora that's doing really well. So, simply put, Jim is an absolute expert in direct to consumer marketing. And I think he knows better than anyone whether or not the customer is always right. And with that, I welcome you to another week of O Ship.
Oh shit.
Jim, so good to see you.
Hey, Freddie, how are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, doing great. So I heard a rumor that this is your last interview in the office you're in, and I don't know if you know this. This is the last interview that I'm doing from this office. So this is a good day, but a sad, sentimental day in some regards.
After 12 years of being here and moving to a new place, it is quite crazy. But so please excuse my bare shelves.
I'm
Um,
in the exact same spot. At least you've got some art up, but they have to be mesmerized by our voices today versus the very simplified backgrounds we both got. So thank God for the audio podcast.
exactly, exactly. So I look
Well,
forward to having quite the conversation with you today.
yeah. Well, again, I really appreciate your time. I did my best to do your background justice. I know you quite well. I'd love for you to maybe give a little bit more background on your own experiences, and so then one understands today, the kind of expertise you bring to this conversation.
That'd be great. Freddie, I've been in direct to consumer for over 30 years. Worked at companies like Kraft Foods and Nestle and Scholastic, all in direct to consumer subscription marketing. Founded my own agency in the early 2000s and ran that for about 18 years. Sold it 3 years ago after having the opportunity to help over 100 companies come to market. During that time, we also launched our brand of Amora Coffee and Tea. We are celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year, so it's been quite the celebration with our consumers. And
Great, congrats.
last year we decided, thank you. Last year we decided to help people pivot into direct to consumer as the pandemic has really started to drive e-commerce needs versus just retail. And that company is called Margrod.
That's super interesting. I definitely want to get into at some point more around more. I mean, 10 years is a great run. I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. Um, let's jump in specifically around the original subject for today. And so I thought a great place to start, maybe before addressing the question head on, is how do you tell the difference between what a customer wants and what a customer needs?
Freddie, I think that's a really interesting question, and sometimes I put myself into that very own position. So, for example, customers need healthcare, health insurance versus wanting it. They need it, and then there's customers who may want, deep streaming digital services versus needing it. And when I differentiate the two, I look at what a want is versus a need. And when you're marketing, if you're marketing a need, we look to market in a fashion that provides easy access for a consumer, versus a want is really more about engaging that consumer and keeping that want integrated, interesting and engaging for that customer. Otherwise, that want is no longer a desire.
Mm. And if you look back at, I guess, I mean, not just the last 10 years or more, but I guess your whole career, what have you learned about selling to wants versus needs?
So again, with a need, it's all about providing easy access and ensuring that that need that that customer has is something that can be fulfilled quite easily on the customer side. For a want or a desire, it's more important about keeping that customer engaged and keeping that customer in a mindset that says, I want your product. So a need often becomes a product that a customer no longer has to think about if you're positioning it correctly.
Mm, hmm.
A want and a desire is very competitive. And that want and desire is a product or a service that you're going to have to highly engage your customer with, and that's been our experience in the past.
I think this is a small tangent, but I know you do a lot of subscription-based e-commerce, both directly and with your own clients. Do you think that a subscription-based works better with needs or wants, or if it's even if it's a wants, do you want to try and get them on the subscription as quickly as possible? I mean, I'm wondering how e-commerce business models basically play into this.
So yes, yes, and yes, Freddie. So
Yeah.
so let's take a need. Okay,
Mm,
there are often areas where people unfortunately don't have access to good, clean drinking water, and they have to resort to bottled water. And so I consider that a want. I'm sorry, I consider that a need versus a want. And it's quite heavy to lug
mm,
water from the grocery store. So that might be one of those subscription ideas within a need that just makes common sense for it to show up at your door. Okay. Then you take a want. Okay. And a want, like Amora Coffee. It's a super premium coffee. It is certainly, amongst a lot of competition. And so, but that's more of a want. And marketing that in a subscription format, okay, we look at it in a couple of different ways. One is we never want the consumer to run out of coffee. That just gives them the opportunity to go out and treat themselves to something else. And number two, it's rather than going to the grocery store and bringing it home on each grocery trip, we'd rather ship it to you fresh and direct from the roaster. So that's where that subscription model seems to make a lot of sense.
Um, so shifting gears a little bit, let's kind of narrow in a little bit more around today's subject around whether the customer is always right. Um, so I guess I like to start. Let's maybe start with the most basic version of this. When is the customer right, and when is the customer not right, in your point of view?
So it's interesting because I've seen it all over. I'm sure you've seen it all over. And, I see signs that say, rule number one, the customer is always right. Rule number two, if the customer is wrong, refer back to rule number one. And so my position on that is nobody can always be right. And it's always a two-way street. And so, but that doesn't mean that the company, the organization who's providing a product or a service shouldn't try to make sure that that consumer has everything that they want and need. Okay. But, when is a consumer right? When's a consumer wrong? A consumer's wrong when I believe when they mistreat the individual on the other side who's trying to help them.
Here, here.
And starting as I started my career as a customer service rep, And that's a rough job. Being a customer service rep, you're serving as a punching bag for quite a bit of the time, and so that's when the customer's just not right. That it's nobody's right when that's the position that is being taken. And so instantly that puts our guard up, okay, and then of course we'll go into escalation mode, and in escalation mode quite often comes back to both me and my partner Marina Di Domenico, okay, whereas we'll call the customer, okay, and if the customer's wrong, that's fine. We're going to still solve their problem. One way or the other, we're going to solve their problem. Okay. When's a customer right? Look, organizations make mistakes all the time. We do. We make mistakes all the time. So when we're wrong, we're going to right that wrong. If we double shipped you by mistake, well, it's on us. Fantastic.
Mm. I feel like, when I look back at the last, let's say, 20 years of my own career, and worth noting a small anecdote, my first kind of, business at Laker.net, my very unoriginally named Laker.net, I did a very healthy amount of customer service and technical support for a dial-up internet. And I do think that being a customer service rep at one point in your life, it gives you almost a Zen-like ability to just later in your life to just start letting small frustrations just kind of breeze over you, because once you've been a customer service rep, everything gets a little easier to deal with, because I think you do have to deal with so much of other people's stress that you start learning to not sweat the small stuff. At least that's how I feel it impacted me. I
It's
don't know if you feel the same.
well, it's exactly right, and I think we're still fortunate enough to live in a world where that's a small percent
Yeah.
of our audience. It's a small percent, and but they have high impact, and so and the other side of that small percent, which is the vast majority, who are very respectful and aren't taking a position of I'm right just because I'm right. Those folks don't want to see that kind of behavior. They because it sort of spoils it for everybody. When you have to, if you have to deal directly with a customer being abusive, and
Mhm.
and that customer, you know, you having to do whatever you have to do to satisfy that customer because of the abusive approach, the
Mhm.
um, the problem becomes for the rest of the customers that they wind up absorbing that cost. And if you
Mhm.
ask other customers, they would
Look,
say
that's such a great insight.
you're going to catch so much. You're going to catch so many more bees with honey than you are with vinegar.
But
Period.
there's and actually an impact that a bad customer, there's customers that in fact are not right, actually impact all the customers that are truly right by creating an operational burden for your organization. I you know
Absolutely.
if I again, looking back at my own life, I think if you'd asked me this 10 years ago, or maybe even 15 years ago, I would have said absolutely the customer is always right. I think I operated by that mantra. I was also operating in a very highly commoditized industry at the time, with internet access, and I sometimes wonder, when you're in a commoditized industry, do those types of businesses maybe struggle more with saying, well, the customer is right or wrong, that because they're fighting for every customer, so much, and you take that abuse, even though it's not right to take that abuse. And I think your point around that actually not serving the greater business, is a fair point. Um,
Freddie, you just sparked a memory for me. Is when I started working at Kraft Foods in the late 1980s. Absolutely, you're right. The customer's always right. The customer's always right. I was fortunate enough to work underneath a leadership team where the position wasn't the customer's always right, but the position was the customer is always your central focus, always.
mhm,
And that was real strong grounding for me anyway, in terms of getting my career off the ground. through other companies and our agencies and our own company is the customer does need to be kept as the center focus. Why? No customers, no business. Okay. And quite frankly, they are in control. They are buying your product or your service.
Mhm.
Okay. But that doesn't make everybody right. It does put the customer into central focus, and that's critical. At Amora, our number one operating principle is simple: any customer communication must result in that customer being in a better state of mind than prior to that communication. Period. It's our number one
Mhm.
operating principle.
It's a good rule to live by. Um, I was trying to think about these situations where the customer isn't right, or certainly as a business owner, the customer service rep, the leader, whoever it is, that has deemed that they feel that the customer is wrong. And on some level, I almost feel like you're picking and choosing your customers by saying that, right? Because you're going to say, look, if you're saying, look, the customer is wrong, you're you're effectively you're going to say, look, by choosing not to agree with you, I'm effectively breaking the customer client relationship, um, and maybe that's a healthy thing. I think especially when you start thinking about the fact that every one of these clients that maybe aren't aligned or creating negative cultural experiences for your staff or literally costing you money. Um, but I'd love to talk about the cultural impact of this. So, in all these various organizations that you've operated, obviously customer service is part of that. What do you think the cultural impact is, particularly in the customer service department, of either having a customer is always right mentality, or the not so in that organization?
Well, I think if in an organization like a customer service organization, if we're not living by honesty, integrity, and respect on both sides of the table, then I think that customer service center is going to wind up having high turnover, um,
Mm,
because I think every one of us deserve honesty, integrity, and respect with everybody that we engage with. And if you're not getting that, well, it sort of becomes a means to an end of somebody leaving. So I think that's critically important. So that's why we're so sensitive to top down directives of this is the only way it can be, and
mm,
especially if you're not on the front lines. So I do think that can impact culture at a customer service center. And then when you start talking about maybe some of the business rules that you put in place where you might be picking and choosing your customers. Again, for us, it's pretty simple. If that customer has a problem, we're going to solve for it. Okay, right or for wrong. Okay, we're going to solve for that problem. If the customer is going to treat our our advocates, our customer service reps, with dishonesty or disrespect, then yes, we are picking our customers because we don't want them in our portfolio family of subscribers. So so that is a choice that we make.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. So, what happens in a situation if the customer, potentially always right, or maybe not, depending on which part of the spectrum you fall in this? But what happens in a situation where a customer complains, they've made an accusation, and there is actually no ability to prove or track it in any direction, and it's really just the word of the customer versus maybe a word of an employee? Do you side with the employee, or do you side with the customer when there's no way to prove it? It's a he said, she said. It's a good
He
test.
said, she said, we solve for the problem. We call a truce, okay, and we assist that customer in whatever that need might be.
Yeah,
Maybe it's a refund, maybe it's a
yeah,
reshipment, okay. And then we watch, and if it
yeah.
happens again, then we
Then
know.
they could have to detect a pattern. That's a fair point,
Right.
because if it is employee, maybe you got to give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you detect a
Absolutely.
pattern, yeah, I think that's very fair.
The only time we take a hard line, Freddie, is if a customer calls and really abusive, vulgar, profane,
I have
okay,
zero tolerance for that nonsense on a side
it's
note. Yeah,
it's it's very simple.
yeah,
Okay, we refund the money, we don't ask for the product back, and we don't allow you to order from us again.
yeah. Good for you.
Um,
And
and
that's
thank
cutting
God,
people off with some really good coffee for the record. They're going to regret
right? And
that.
it's sort of one negative experience or one abusive experience with our customer service team. Okay, offsets 500 positive experiences
Yeah,
they've had.
it's true.
Okay, it's treat the person on the other side of the phone as you would want to be treated if it were you on the other
Hmm.
side of the phone. I know it sounds cliche, but it's but
But a
it
lot of people don't practice this, even though they talk it. So I'm going to put you on the spot again. Can you tell me about a time where the customer was right and you were wrong? Do you mind being that vulnerable?
I don't mind being that vulnerable because I really learned from it. And look, you and I can have a conversation. I've made wrong decisions lots of times. Okay, that's part of the business. Okay, but there was this one particular case where it got elevated to me, where it was a whole bunch of shipments, 7, 8, 9, 10 shipments, a year's worth of shipments that the customer decided to charge back on their credit card, and the credit card company allowed it to go through. And so I was kind of miffed by the fact that you've been receiving all this coffee for the last 7, 8, or 9 months, and you've just decided you don't want the coffee. And instead of calling and asking for a return or refund or whatever, without giving us an opportunity to solve for it, you called the bank and just, in my mind, fraudulently charged
Yeah.
it back. And so I decided to inquire. Okay, but before I inquired, I fought the bank. Okay,
Hmm.
and we won,
Hmm.
and we got our money back. And I had only learned to find out after I inquired, because I really wanted to understand what happened. And I did this wrong. I should have inquired first. The person had passed away and had
Oh,
deceased. Okay,
ouch. Yeah.
and so shipments were showing up, but nobody realized shipments were showing up. And I guess who was ever ultimately finalizing things saw that there was all these charges on the card
Mhm.
and just charged it back. And so I learned. What I learned from that was inquire first before just assuming fraudulence. And so I'll never forget that. That was a
I'm sure.
sobering.
I'm sure that hits you. It's one of those ones where you find the news and you just kind of slowly slink under your desk because you're like, "Oh God, what did I do?" I
But those are the things we learned from,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
we actually changed processes as a result of doing that. So I immediately put the person in the wrong, and
yeah.
they weren't. I was.
I really very man of you to admit that was a great example. I'm going to count that as your oh ship story for the day because I think that definitely qualifies. Let's jump gears a little bit into Amora in general. So you just had your 10-year anniversary. Congrats. That's
Thank you.
that's huge. It's a great product. Can you talk a little bit about the origin story of that? Because at the time, I mean, you were deep in agency land when you birthed this company, right?
We were. It was 2011 when we had launched, and so we were right in the middle of agency land. We had lots of other clients that we were managing direct to consumer for, and building their subscription businesses and e-commerce businesses. And we handled the entire ecosystem of offer, media, creative, operations, warehousing, merchant processing, customer service, everything. And so one of our clients was a coffee client, and that was Javalia Coffee, and we were doing a lot of business with them. And they had decided at the time to compete with Starbucks, and they were winding down at the retail level, and they were winding down their direct to consumer coffee business. So we asked for permission to launch our own coffee business, and they granted us permission, which was very, very nice of them. And
So just to be clear, and you basically felt like you were watching them doing this, and what were you thinking? Like, hey, this is crazy. Like we know how to do this. We should keep this thing going. Is that kind of the
well, we
mentality?
knew how to do it, but it was beyond that. There was now a void in the marketplace, and before waiting for another competitor to come in and fill the void, we decided to fill the void ourselves.
Hmm.
And so,
Smart.
and Amora was born. But we were able to put together the offer strategies, the creative strategies, all the operations, the entire tech stack, all of that. I mean, we just went through a major new tech stack conversion. We could talk about that later. But we had the baby. The baby was born and didn't have a name, and we were trying to figure it out. And every name we came up with was taken. And Marina and I were sitting one day, and by the way, we're a family-owned company. Marina and I are
Right.
married. Okay, and we said, well, coffee is all about freshness. It's all about aroma. And what does aroma sound like backwards? And that's Amora. And Amora is love. So the love of coffee, and
Uh,
Amora Coffee has since been
it's a great
trademarked
name.
and launched.
Yeah, it's
So
and I didn't even think about the aroma backwards. That's very cool. Okay, I love that.
it,
Good. I'm
it,
glad
it,
I can't
was
believe I didn't know that before.
and it just jumped up one day. It was like, I mean, we had strategy sessions around names, and it just popped up one day.
Great brands, great ideas, great names have a funny way of doing that. I feel like you could just paint over them forever, and out of nowhere they just kind of hit you.
It's
So,
exactly what happened to us.
and then as far as a direct consumer business goes, again, you've been doing it for a long time. Specific to even your own business, what would you say the biggest things that have changed over the last let's say 10 years ago versus last year?
So it's actually a two-part answer, because what's changed last year versus what might have changed a couple of years before versus 10 years ago. And so 10 years ago, subscription was more about continuity, and which was more about there wasn't as much flexibility, and the product would come on a cadence that was selected, and it was, I call it the take it or leave it type of model. And so it was there for if you wanted it, and if you didn't want it, then you would expire out. And that's very different than what today's subscription is. And today's subscription is all about the service that the consumer controls, whether that's product, whether that's variety, whether that's intervals, whether that's skipping shipments. And so that there's a significant difference in the last 10 years around the subscription model and capabilities itself, especially as the e-commerce and the digital platforms allow us to be so flexible with our customers, or customers to be so flexible with our service. But if you look at it versus a year or two ago, as the global pandemic has come down on all of us, there was a significant pivot to buying direct, and buying online, whether that was
Mhm.
e-commerce and buying one shots from a store, or
Mhm.
whether that was staples or essential needs, and doing that on a subscription basis because it was easier. So in the last year or two, the entire subscription landscape, e-commerce landscape, has certainly increased and multiplied beyond where
Mm.
it was just a couple of years earlier. So
So ultimately, it's been good for your business then.
it has. It
Yeah,
has, and it's nobody wants to profit off of a misfortune.
I
Uh,
understand. Yeah.
so so what Amora has been doing is we've been working very hard at trying to give our subscribing customers discounts, our
Hmm.
one shot customers the ability to buy not at full price. When
It's
the
great.
pandemic first started, we helped our entire customer file by actually providing them grocery gift cards,
Hmm.
just because we thought it was our way of helping.
It's always the good guy, Jim. I love hearing that. That's great. You're doing it right as usual. I have to ask. When you think about what you sold 10 years ago, you're talking about that getting into the subscription space, and obviously I was living this at the same times as well. that the tech was not so easy to get in. At this point, there was e-commerce platforms, but no one had really figured subscription out well. So people were having to build a lot of custom platforms and things like that. Now, I think to your point, so many of the major platforms have, subscription is just a naturally integrated component of these platforms. So the technological barrier to entry is much, 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 much lower.
It is.
Simultaneously, I'd say there's a higher interest around it, but I'd then say at the same time the sophistication of the players in the space is also up exponentially. So the barrier to entry now might be quality of execution, brand strength, things like that. And then the other one I was wondering is it could be barrier is actually supply chain, because it's just obviously challenging times out there. Any reaction to that? Does that kind of ring true to you, or do you think not quite? Or I'd love to get your kind of your input.
Well, I think both ring true. So one is today's subscription platforms and e-commerce platforms are enterprise platforms, and they're not legacy type platforms and custom builds. And the nice part about that is that everybody has the opportunity to move their business forward with the enhancements that are being made to these platforms, because these enhancements are being made globally. Now, are there some restrictions where you might have been able to do something at a custom level where you might not be able to do that in some of these enterprise platforms? Sure, there are. Okay, but the difference is that you could do so much more on these enterprise platforms. Okay, and these enterprise platforms are developing their interaction with the consumers in a format that is almost like when you're driving, you understand what a stop sign looks like. You know who has the right of way when turning left or turning right. They're bringing these checkout processes together so that a consumer understands where they are in the flow and it's
Mm-hmm.
not looking alien to them. And most of what I do in Margrod, our agency on direct to consumer and e-commerce, is assisting clients in converting from their legacy systems over to these new
Mm-hmm.
enterprise systems. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's been a very keen focus of ours. So that is really, and I think you're going to see that continue to evolve over the years. I think we're just at the tipping point, okay, of what these enterprise systems and all their integrations can do. And then
I
when you
think that's
shift
super fair.
and then when you shift over to supply chain's rough. If it's corrugated, you're paying 2x on what you were paying in the past. If you're trying to bring containers in from overseas, you're paying 2-3x of what you were paying in the past. Even in the coffee market, not only do we have supply chain issues due to COVID. But Brazil, it's pretty nationally well known. Okay, Brazil had a drought and then a frost, and so even coffee beans are in short supply, and so and that's where I think companies really need to start to become creative. What are you going to do when you have a supply chain challenge? Do you just pass the cost on to the consumer? Well, I think we're seeing that in our inflationary numbers today. It's very clear to
Mm-hmm.
see it in our inflationary numbers. Okay. For us, we're not. We've decided that we're going to ride it out. We're going to ride it out for as long as we can. We bought long on our coffee, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But we're going to ride it out, and we're not going to pass a price increase on to our consumers. If anything, we're still discounting to try and help our consumers during this time. But in everything you read about coffee, you're going to see you're watching your cup of Joe is going to increase in cost. So
And congrats on going long on your coffee, by the way. I just had a vision of a Jim Fassina kind of Scrooge McDuck type image of you just swimming in giant, buckets of beans, as you've hoarded all these beans so you could keep your costs down.
thank God we have a very, very strong coffee partner that knows a lot more about that than I do.
Well, smart partner. I'm going to jump back to our original subject for a second, and I'd like to give my take on this. The customer is always right. And the customer is always right is a tricky challenge. And I think that the words of advice that I would give anyone who's listening or watching our ship today would be, when the customer is telling you their point of view, assuming that, let's scratch all the people that make it hard to listen to you because they're being toxic, or not the kind of customer you want because of the way they handle themselves. But when a customer is telling you something and you don't agree with the point of view they have about your business or how someone handled it, I think it's really easy for a lot of people out there to instantly go, I'm not like that, or my business isn't like that. I know my business isn't like that, and put a wall up. And I would say that I'm not saying you always have to agree with them, but I am saying that everyone should really take a moment to pause, really listen, reflect, maybe even sleep on it for a night. Because I know a lot of people, and I might even include myself in this basis, my first reaction is to go, maybe no. And then when I process things for a bit, I'll start to go, mm, maybe they were right in more areas than I gave them credit for. And so, when a customer is taking the time to call you, because a lot of times they don't even call you to tell you you're wrong. They just fire you. I don't, or especially if it's a commoditized product, they just stop using your product. They stop buying you. They pick a competitor. You don't even know that you were wrong. They just change. And so if a customer is actually taking the time to call you, that's actually more than 99% of people are going to do for you out there. And take the time to listen. You don't always have to agree, but you should be thankful for those people that call. Maybe you don't even like how they're expressing it, but take opportunity to ask some questions. You've just got a willing participant in a dialogue. Again, most people aren't so fortunate. You're not gonna, if they're going totally off the rails, again, you may say, look, I just don't want this person as a customer. But don't do that just because you didn't like what they said. Maybe you don't like how they said it, and that may be worth getting the rhythm for. But don't do it just because you didn't like what they said. And really use this as a time to take an inventory and of yourself, your business, and your staff. Sometimes, as the CEO, the boss, the VP, the manager, whatever, you can be oblivious to things that are happening under your watch because people are always on best behavior for their boss. I can speak from my own personal experiences. People that were notable problems within my own businesses or in companies where I'd been a partner or whatever, and I just didn't see it. I just couldn't see it because they were always awesome around me and I loved them, but they were not like that around anyone else. And so, maybe these customers are the canary in the coal mine kind of thing, and take advantage of those moments. Any reaction to that, Jim?
It is so much easier to learn from what you've done wrong than to learn from what you've done right. Why? You don't generally get the calls when you've done something right. You'll get the calls when you've done something wrong.
If,
And
like I said, but if you're lucky, if you get the call, sometimes they
and
just just change on you.
Freddie, that's one of the reasons why, we have 24/7, 365. Okay. If we didn't
Mm,
want to hear from our customers, we could change that. It's really important to us. Okay. Whether it's email or phone or chat, whatever it might be. It's super important to us. But even if we disagree, okay, if somebody brings something to our attention, it only gives us the opportunity to make it better.
mhm,
Okay. And so if somebody calls us up and we do get these calls, your Elegante coffee is the best coffee I've ever tasted. Okay. And we love hearing that feedback and we get those reviews. Okay. That's not going to help me as much as somebody calling me up and saying, I ordered my Elegante coffee and for some reason it's not here and I ordered it 14 days ago. Can you help me
mhm,
figure out why? Okay. Well, okay, that helps me look at our logistics side. Okay. Or if somebody calls us up and says, you know what, this bag of coffee it tastes terrible. And the bag was soft. Well, now I know my bag was punctured. Okay.
mhm,
So now I know. Okay. So that's how that, we take all of that as a learning experience. Okay. Because if we don't listen to that, we're not going to be able to learn and build our business. And that's how we've built our business.
mhm,
That's how we've built our business. That's how we've helped other companies build their businesses. And anybody, I'll go back to how I started. anybody who thinks they're right about everything all the time, okay, there's no room for somebody who's always being right. There's just no room for it.
Mm.
It's kind of very old school thinking, I think.
I think that is great, wise words to live by, and a perfect way to end this week's O Ship. Jim, that was a great, great conversation. I'm glad we were able to have a healthy debate around, a subject that's been around for a while, but people still talk about all the time. I think we're both going on the side of the customer isn't always right. Is that fair?
I think that's fair, and
Yeah.
I think that's fair from our own experiences,
Mm,
both being the customer and not being the customer, being the
mm.
provider of the service or the
Yeah,
goods.
yeah. But definitely don't be dismissive of these customers. At the end of the day, they are the lifeblood of your business. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching. If you'd like to learn more about O Ship Show or find out about any of our audio podcasts or all the different channels that we broadcast across or stream to, go to oshipshow.com. Thank you for those of you, whether you've been watching on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter live today. We love seeing engagement with the show. So, again, thank you for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of O Ship. Please, if you'd like to support us, the best thing you can do is subscribe to any of our channels or give us a like or even share on your social feeds. So really, really, really appreciate it. And and if you'd like to learn more about Jim, you can find out more about him at any of his social profiles or Jim Fassina on Twitter, or they can just check out your agency, Margrod. What's the web address for Margrod?
So you can reach me at jim@margrod.com.
Perfect. And then also check out Amora Coffee. It's great stuff, and definitely if you haven't had a chance to taste it, it's really, really premium, the real deal stuff if you're a real coffee lover. So thanks so much, everyone, and I appreciate you joining
Freddie,
us for
thank
this
you.
week's O Ship. Thank you, Jim. Take care.
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you, everybody.